Hey everyone, Chris here with Stories in Cardboard. Today we're going to continue with the 1956 Top Spotlight. Today, after we finish, we'll actually be officially halfway through. It'll be 60 cards of the 120. Now before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to a new YouTube channel. It's Ryan at History Through Cards. He also has a website called historythroughcards.com, and I'll put links to both of those in the description. But give him a try. Go over there, give him a follow. He does a really good job as far as history with cards, how they're produced, how they're distributed, the history of the players. On his website, he's got a lot of great written articles that discuss a lot of great topics like 1933 Gaudi cards, T205, T206 baseball cards. He has an article on 1959 Topps football. Just a great resource if you're a history buff for sports cards. So let's go ahead and start with this. The first card we have is card number 56, which is Bill Stitz of the Detroit Lions. He played collegiately at UCLA. The first 2 years that he was in the NFL, he was a two-way player playing both defense and offense. Again, I've talked about this before, but I really like the color scheme of the Detroit Lions and the New York Giants cards. I think the red background with the blue jerseys really look great. And again, that Lions logo is one of the all-time great classic logos as well. I also like this pose. They just don't make poses like this anymore for football cards. And this is just classic 1950s pro football pose. I'd love to see this make a comeback. It probably won't, but I love it. And the next card we have here, let's get it turned the right side here, is card number 57 of Don Colo. So, Don Colo, this is an interesting player here. He went to a small high school in Massachusetts. They didn't even have enough students to field a football team, so he didn't play high school football. Now, after he graduated high school, he joined the U.S. Navy and served in the South Pacific during World War II. When he got done with that, he came home, he enrolled at Brown University and played college football there. Now, he had an inauspicious beginning to his pro football career. In 1950, he was drafted by the Baltimore Colts in the first year that they were an NFL team after the AAFC merger, and they finished an abysmal 1-11. Now, that team was facing serious financial trouble, so they folded and player contracts were sold back to the NFL, who then held a draft for those in 1951. In 1951, he was drafted by the New York Yanks football team. And after that team only won one game, the team's contracts were bought, and they ultimately became the Dallas Texans in 1952. Now, for those that don't know, the 1952 Dallas Texans were one of the worst franchises in NFL history. They lost their first 9 games, and then the NFL basically took over ownership of the franchise. Then on Thanksgiving Day that year, the Texans pulled a miracle of all miracles by beating the Chicago Bears. Now, for the sake of time today, I'm not really going to talk about that, but I may actually do a video in the future on the 1952 Dallas Texans, because I really think it's a fascinating story that kind of leads to a lot of things that kind of shape the history of the NFL. So for Colo, he's played 3 years in the NFL. He's got 3 total wins, and he's played for 3 franchises that have ultimately folded. You would think the man would get discouraged, but you know, he keeps going, he keeps playing, and the Texans basically became the 1953 Baltimore Colts, with many of their player contracts moving to that new franchise. Colo was one of those, but he never actually played for that the reinvention of the Colts. He actually got traded to the Cleveland Browns, which of course was great news for him. In Cleveland, he would start to be recognized as one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL, being named to 3 Pro Bowls and 3 second-team All-Pro teams. And during this time, the Browns had one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, he was able to win 2 championships with the Browns during their dynasty years as well. Now, just to give you an idea of how good Colo was, John Henry Johnson, during his Hall of Fame induction speech, he confessed, "I don't think I've been this scared since I was chased by Bob Gain and Don Colo." Bob Gain was another really good defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns during that time period. Colo was named to Pro Football Reference's second team 1950s all-decade team. So this just goes to show you a lot of these guys, they get forgotten, unfortunately. And it's hard to judge how good some of these defensive players were in the 50s because they didn't keep stats for tackles or for sacks. So it's really hard to understand just how good they were. You have to go by what their contemporaries thought of them. Next card we have, again, I'm trying to put these up backwards. We have card number 58, which is a short print of Ollie Matson of the St. Louis Cardinals. Matson competed in the 1952 Olympics in track and field and won a bronze and a silver medal when he competed. He was the 3rd overall pick in the 1952 NFL draft, and that year he was the co-winner of the Rookie of the Year along with Hugh McElhenney of the San Francisco 49ers. In 1953, he missed the entire season by serving in the U.S. Army. He played a total of 14 years in the NFL, and he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. But like many of these great stars from the 50s, they're not fully appreciated when comparing their stats to the modern-day players. And one day I'll talk more about how you can't really compare these players based on their stats. But as far as his playing style, he was a great dual-threat player who was equally good at running the football as well as he was at catching the football. Now, while he played, unfortunately, and this was a sad thing for him, those Cardinals teams were not very good. And even when he got traded and later played for the Rams, they were not very good. And unfortunately, he only played on 2 teams that finished above 500. He was traded to the Rams in 1959. When he was traded to the Rams, he was traded for 9 players, which is crazy. I mean, 9 players for 1 player. When he retired, he was the 2nd all-time in all-purpose yards to only Jim Brown. So when he retired, Jim Brown was the only player who had more all-purpose yards than he did. So here's to a great player who he really shouldn't be forgotten and should probably be appreciated more than he is. And the next card we have, continuing the theme of underappreciated and often forgotten players, here's one of my favorite 1950s players. Harlan Hill was one of the best receivers during this era. Now, this is an uncorrected error on here where they actually misspelled his name. It should be Harlon. They never did correct that, so that is an uncorrected error. But his correct spelling is with an O, not an A at the end there. He won the Rookie of the Year in 1954 when he set a team record for the Chicago Bears with 1,124 receiving yards, while also leading the NFL that year with 12 touchdown passes. Now remember, this was during a 12-game season. During that season, his big game, he had a really big game against the San Francisco 49ers. He had 212 yards receiving in that game and 4 touchdowns, including the winning touchdown with 30 seconds left in the game. In 1955, he once again led the NFL in touchdown receptions and won the Jim Thorpe Trophy for NFL Player of the Year. Now, unfortunately for him, injuries kind of started taking a toll with him and kind of wore him down, and he kind of started declining. And then in 1958, he tore his Achilles tendon and tried to make a comeback, but he was never quite the same, didn't have quite the same speed. Now, again, I've always loved this Bears logo and the yellow with the blue jerseys on here, the dark blue jerseys. I love this team from 1956. The Bears ended up playing in the championship that year. of course, but ended up losing to the Giants. He actually still holds multiple team records for the Bears. And then last, as we try to finish this up pretty quick here, but do want to give some attention to this guy. This is Lenny Moore's rookie card. Probably one of my favorite cards from an eye appeal standpoint that there is. I just love the orange background, that blue jersey, those big white numbers, and the pose as he's just kind of looking off there. To me, this is just one of the more iconic looking football cards from the 50s. Moore was a two-time NFL champion. He's a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And much like Ollie Matson, he was considered one of the best all-around backs in the 1950s. And he also was a dual threat, equally good at catching the ball as he was at running the football. To me, one of the most amazing stats that he has is 3 times during his career, he rushed for an average of more than 7 yards per carry, which is just incredible. And he didn't miss any games those years either. I mean, those were legit seasons of 7 yards per carry. In 1962, he injured his knee and lost his starting job in 1963. But in 1964, he returned and scored a total of 20 touchdowns. He also, later in his career, he scored a rushing touchdown in 18 consecutive appearances, which was equaled by LaDainian Tomlinson in 2005. Moore was just a fantastic player that's worthy of much of the praise for doing what he accomplished in the NFL. So that brings us to halfway point of this. We've got 60 more cards to go. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.